Irv, do you mind starting by talking a little bit about the early years at Continental and specifically how similar or different they were to a search fund situation?
Well, okay, here's the straight story. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on ancient history, but there are more interesting topics to talk about today and tomorrow, about today's and tomorrow's world, so I'll go through this quickly. Our search was pathetic. There's no other word for it. My partner and I were both working in Boston post-MBA. We had been college friends. We started comparing notes on things we were uncovering separately. Then we decided to work together. And so we put the word out through our network that we were looking for a company that was not too big and not too small and was profitable. That was about the only sensible thing we said. And had some growth potential, which was probably good too. And that was it for criteria. So needless to say, over the first 6 or 8 months, we looked at these wonderful businesses like indoor tennis centers, bowling alleys, residential fuel oil companies. These are literally companies we looked at. A plastic inflatable toy company in western Massachusetts, and some other light manufacturing business in New Jersey I've forgotten about. But after 6 or 8 months, we did refine the criteria a bit, and we came up with the thought that no product companies. We don't want to invest in a product company because of product development cycles and issues and product obsolescence. So we did focus on service companies. And we also hoped for recurring revenue, which was a somewhat new thought, not totally. I mean, a little bit different. It's certainly different from what we had come up with. And then finally, we wanted a franchise business, meaning not a KFC business, but a franchise in the sense of a claim on the customer. So we did have those criteria that we developed. The next to last business that we came across that we did not start was also a comedy of errors, but we stumbled across the then nursing home business. All nursing homes in the mid-60s were, almost all, were in converted older houses, multi-story old houses with circular staircases and all kinds of code violations, and there the people were stacked all around these places. And so the federal government passed the Hill-Burton Act offering long-term loans at very low cost, slow repayment if you'd construct new nursing home facilities, recognizing there was a huge need. And we got all excited about that because we were both MBA types in our late 20s, and we looked at the numbers and all this attractive debt, and this is going to be great. So what did we do? The first 2 or 3 months we spent making up our business plan right in the office. Did we visit any nursing homes? No, we didn't. So after 2 or 3 months, we had this very elegant business plan. It was really pretty nice about how we were going to build nursing homes with this great debt and required very little equity. And we looked at each other, and one of us said, what if we should go visit a nursing home? Well, we had casually been in them visiting somebody maybe from time to time, but not really. So we visited 8 or 10 of them. And at the end of that process, we looked at each other and said, this is not going to be any fun at all. This is actually depressing to look at these places. And even if we run modern ones in modern facilities, this is not going to be a fun business. So to our criteria, we added either fun or at least a business that we could engage in and feel was fair value and was interesting to us and was fun to kind of be around. And those were our criteria. Finally, we stumbled across the cable television business. And Warren Buffett has made the statement that when good management meets a bad industry, the industry wins. Well, the correlative of that is also true, and was true in our case. We fell into a honeypot of a wonderful industry, and it provided a cushion for feckless, totally inexperienced management where if there's a mistake that could be made, we found it. And that's not false modesty, it's accurate. We really made a lot of mistakes in the beginning. In fact, a lot of what is taught here in these courses, particularly the course I'm teaching now here, is based on stuff we did wrong. Just obvious. We were well educated and halfway smart, but we just did stupid things. And it's easy to do stupid things, as our conversation will show a little later on as it develops.
So Irv, of course, is being incredibly modest there, and just going back to something that that John Stanton said this morning. You know, even in very good industries, great management teams drive disproportionate results, and nobody else got returns like the ones I described earlier, including John Malone. So Irv's being very modest. Anyway, let's at a higher level on search funds. What trends, as you sort of look out there, have been most surprising or interesting for you to observe as it relates to search funds?
So what captures all of us really is how much they have taken hold, and a lot of it is pretty recent. They started in the mid-'80s, Kirk Riedinger and Jamie Turner and Jim Southern had different versions of the start of a search and a start of searches, and they added some supplemental funding in one case, and both bought businesses that were successful. But in the '80s, not much happened. And then the see-through period of the late '80s, when we had a huge downturn, the see-through buildings, a lot of built that were never rented out, and they called that the see-through era. Not much happened. Then in the '90s, it picked up some steam, but then the dot-com boom occurred in the late '90s. And so that damped everything down. But then 2000, 2001 came, the bottom fell out of that, and that's when search funds really picked up steam. And to me, I've always thought of them, just as we thought of the cable business as just kind of an interesting version of the real estate business. You know, you build an asset, you leverage it, you pay off the debt, and you own it free and clear. We thought of search funds as an opportunity for a few interested people to amass some capital and find a good opportunity and build a business. It was a path to entrepreneurship. I had no sense that it would ever catch on the way it has since in the past 15 years or so. So that's certainly one surprising thing. Variants are also starting to show up. Institutional capital, the purchase of secondary shares, startups from search funds, longer holding periods. So recap transactions are gradually starting to appear, and some signs of a maturing industry such as those are appearing.
And so looking forward from today, where do you think the search fund is headed as an asset class, looking forward, say, 5 to 10 years from today?
Well, just backing up 1 second, one thing I would add to the prior and then take, so what happened to form search funds? Well, if you think about it, you needed opportunities, you needed capital, and you needed talent. Opportunities have always been there and continue to be there. Capital was always waiting on the sidelines, but the capital's position was always, well, bring me a deal, show me a deal, and I'll consider investing in it. So there was not a path into the vortex, if you will, and then the talent said, well, I have no way to conduct a search. I owe this money from going to a good MBA school, and how am I going to find, I can't look for a company part-time. So the last mile was not constructed until the search fund idea took hold, and that was really last mile construction that brought the time to search for a company and find a better quality company, and the attraction of the capital to have its risk capital stepped up, and then to have a pretty low cost option on a better quality company, and that attracted the searchers. So this is kind of, I think of it as a last mile bringing together of those three critical resources. So looking ahead, this is nothing but obvious to everybody here, but the influx of capital is bound to continue and will probably accelerate. Institutional capital is now either assembling or appearing. There will be more and more capital. Opportunities are boundless. There are over 100,000 companies with positive EBITDA of under $10 million just in this country. A lot of them are not suited for search funds, but many of them are. You could cut out product companies and all kinds of, some aren't for sale and so on. But there are a lot of them that are, and opportunities are not the problem. So capital's not the problem. So what's going to happen is that more and more talent will be attracted, and the average quality of that talent, I think, will diminish. There'll be people who get funded who aren't as good as you in the audience now, and as good as the people who have been running searching for and running companies have been. This is a parallel, in a sense, to the venture capital industry, which took off in the 50s, way back in the 50s, gathered some steam in the 60s, and by the 70s was an industry. But then we saw in the 80s and 90s, and I'm not a student of economic history, but I do know this to be true, that then in the 80s and 90s we saw groups of venture capital partners who could not raise subsequent funds because their investment record was not adequate. I think in this case we're going to see searchers who don't do as good a job as you are and those before you have done so far. The capital will flow, those people will be attracted, and I think failure rates will stop coming down very likely. I'm sad to say that, but I think it's a product of the pressures of capital, and the capital is attracted, as both practice and economic theory would suggest, when there are returns of 30% plus, it's going to attract capital, and that's going to have both positive effects. It's going to have positive effects on the best searchers. They're going to be able to drive attractive terms, at least as attractive as those now. But it's going to have deleterious effects on some people who are investors and operators who are not as competent.
Great. Okay, so we're going to shift now to a few key topics related to managing growing companies. And first, so Irv, you have kind of a unique perspective as a teacher and an investor, board member, and a former CEO. So what are the most common mistakes you've seen from young CEOs over the years?
So Jim Harbaugh was David Shaw, whom some of you heard speak at 1 o'clock today, the football coach of Stanford. He was David Shaw's predecessor. He came to take over the Stanford football program in 2007. And by any measure, Stanford football had been lackluster prior to 2007. And Jim Harbaugh's first words to his team, all of the players, on the first day of practice were, "Gentlemen, we're going to win by character and cruelty." So he didn't mean cruelty. He just meant, I want to move the pendulum and get rid of this reputation for soft play that Stanford teams had suffered under for a number of years. So I think, in response to your question, I think that it's important to plant the flag for what kind of company you want, even if you're a first-time CEO with no experience. I think it's okay to say, we're going to win here. Here's what matters. We're going to do it the right way. This is a meritocracy. There are no sacred cows. The quality of your work matters, and the way you get along with other people matters. Just set down a few ground rules that this is a business operation, and you have the chance to succeed and prosper. I mean, together with a bunch of other messages, but make an opening statement and just say, well, and at least have the people feel, well, he may be young looking and inexperienced, but at least he has some ideas about what kind of business he wants, and good for him. I think a second thing, a mistake I see made often, is that there's some feeling that new CEOs have that they have to act like a CEO. And that means put on some kind of a mask or an affect and be someone that you're not really. So one of your direct reports comes to you and says, hey boss, what do you think about this? Well, you think, well, I'm supposed to know the answer. He or she's asking me what I think, so I blurt something out. What? That's about the dumbest. I mean, I've done that countless times, but that's dumb. That's silly. The best answer is, I don't know. Let's figure this out together. I don't know. I don't know is very powerful. It shows authenticity, it shows humility, and it shows a desire to work with the person and help discover what the best answer is. So I think acting like a CEO, there's no such thing. Act like yourself. Be authentic, and there are things you don't know. It's okay to admit them. Reflect your humanness. We all make mistakes, so admit that up front. I don't know the answer. And by the way, there's another message there, sub rosa, that's a little more subtle, which is managerial effectiveness does not necessarily equate to knowledge of facts or knowledge of exactly what to do situationally, but we can figure it out together. And it encourages other people to open up and stop putting on faces as well. I think there's a couple things I'm going to talk about later. One of them is advice seeking. That's going to come later. A little bit more is about sales. But I think it's also a mistake I see is losing sight of the importance of all of the people in your workforce. Front line, middle line, your key team, your board. They're all people. And find a way to connect with them as much as you can. Management by walking around is a favorite phrase here. It was coined by Bill Hewlett at Hewlett-Packard. Walk around, talk to somebody. Say, hi, Mary. What's up today? How's your work going? What are you working on? I'm Joe. What are you working on? Maybe you have a name tag on, or maybe they already know you're Joe, or you're John, or you're Sarah, or whoever you are. You're the CEO. Got to be gender careful here. And so just invest a little bit of time and be human with the person and care about them. Take an interest in them. You don't have to spend all day, but walk around a little bit and get to know people. I think the last thing I would say, other than these other two categories I referred to that we'll pick up later, is it's really important not to lose sight of what things are really important, like your relationships with your family and your friends, and investing in yourself a bit, in what you like to do, keeping yourself healthy, investing in the activities that you like to as much as you can. You're going to have to sacrifice some things under the pressure of being a CEO, and maybe it's community service for now. Maybe it's some other things, but be sure it's not the things that really matter to you the most. And it's easy. A lot of CEOs who get divorced blame their companies, but really they really ought to, it's not the companies. Because the world is filled with successful CEOs who have happy family relationships, and there's no need to throw them under the bus. End of sermon, sorry.
Okay, we're going to touch next on talent management, a topic we've heard in some other sessions today. So Irv, any advice or thoughts on hiring, retaining, and yes, firing key management team members?
It's been said that C companies hire behind the curve. B companies hire ahead of the curve. And A companies hire and fire ahead of the curve. That's not easy to do. It sounds ruthless. It's not intended to be ruthless. But if you think about teams you have now or you have worked with in the past, there are placeholders, very likely at every stratum of the company. People who are doing an okay job now, not a superior job, They fit into the culture well. They've probably been there a while. People like them. They have no upward mobility as the company grows. They have no ability to do other things. They don't contribute to the thoughts of the company. Those people, you need to be thinking about finding another place for them. If you can find a place inside the company, demotions don't work, but as the company grows, if they can manage, continue to manage part of what they're doing now and do it effectively, fine. But you may have to move them out of the company. And the best companies make room for A players in key seats. No B+ players in key seats, please. Now, there are B and C players in all great companies, but they aren't anywhere near the top of those companies. So you want to be sure that you're hiring ahead of the curve, but also thinking about who's not promotable, who can't ride with us. 2 years from now, we expect to have grown 40%. Who can't take that ride with us? And what changes should we be making to make room for the right person in those seats? Just mindful of the time. I'm a fan of performance management, not performance reviews so much. Sure, you have to have performance reviews, but performance management means immediate feedback to people. I think it's really useful if you talk to somebody and say, Fred, the meeting we were in on Friday, I thought your response to so-and-so was a little tough. You probably didn't intend it that way, but when so-and-so's idea was advanced, you said, well, that doesn't make any sense. I think we should do such and such. So we've got to be really careful about the way we talk to each other. And you know, I would ask you to be more sensitive to how what you say lands on other people. That's a favorite phrase of us around the Stanford Business School. How does your comment land on other people? It strikes me as a little bit awkward, but we use it. So the self-awareness quotient is really what we're talking about. Remember that there are many ways of compensating your key employees, only a few of which have to do with money and stock. You can compensate them with authentic praise, with thanks, with access to information that they might not otherwise know that you do know, by seeking their advice. And these are all legitimate ways of connecting with key people. You know, people who leave companies don't leave companies, they leave bosses. Be sure you're a boss they're not going to leave, and be sure that they're going to say, boy, when I go to that next company, am I going to get the same amount of care and praise and thanks and access to information as I'm getting in my old company? Make that a high bar for people. It's cost-free, and it's so effective.
Great. And you've developed a whole course on this, Irv, but any overall advice on difficult conversations and how to best handle them?
So a couple of core thoughts on difficult conversations are, one of the ways I think about them is directness with respect. So if you're terminating somebody, that's a difficult conversation. Let's be direct with them up front and say it to them right in the beginning, but let's say it respectfully. And pause, a pause in what you say often carries with it respect. So if I say to somebody, we've had a number of meetings, we've been trying to work on this, it's not working out, it's really time for you to move on, and the purpose of this conversation is to talk about the timing and the terms and conditions under which you leave this company. I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but I suspect it's not much of a surprise. And then stop. Just stop and see what their reaction is, because you're showing respect and you're showing some empathy for how they might be feeling, as opposed to talking on and on and on and on. So directness with respect is one. Meeting them where they are, which is an old phrase of the hospice movement. That's one of their mottos, is meet the patient where the patient is. Well, meet the person you're talking to in a difficult conversation where she or he is. So think a little bit about where they're coming from in this conversation. I teach a course at Stanford Medical School, helping medical students play the role of doctors in role-played conversations with patients and families over bad medical situations. It's not dissimilar from the business school course, except the contexts are obviously different. And there's one issue that I thought of that appears in both courses, and that is delivering bad news. So in the business school course, it's a person who expects to get a promotion. All the peers think he's going to get the promotion. He doesn't get the promotion. Somebody younger and less experienced gets the promotion for good and sufficient reason. And in the medical school, there are a lot more chips on the table. It's a man 48 years old who, he jogs every morning, and for the past week or so, he's noticed that the lower part of his right leg and foot doesn't feel quite the same. He can't quite identify why, so he goes to the doctor. The doctor refers him to a neurologist, gives him tests. He has the meeting with the neurologist, and the neurologist needs to tell this 48-year-old man who is not suspecting it at all. In fact, he comes into the office and says, "Hi, doc, how's it going? What'd you find out from my tests?" Very upbeat. He has MS at the age of 48. And the students need to be the doctor telling the patient that he has MS. So these are hard conversations, and there are all kinds of ways of handling them. I think the most effective way is to tell the truth right away, calmly and respectfully, as opposed to a long wind-up and a build-up or some elliptical stuff about, well, you may have some neurological thing we want to do for. No, we know you have MS. Don't we owe you the respect of telling you have MS, and then we're going to offer you a path of subsequent meetings with physicians that can help you learn how to mitigate it and deal with it the best you can. And the same is true in the business school situation. So I think of meeting them where they are and directness with respect. The last thing I would say is, it's really easy to write bullet points in advance of a difficult conversation and figure out what you're going to say. But when you start to put them in words, it's not so easy. So you need to practice those difficult conversations, hopefully with a partner or a spouse, or maybe in front of your phone and play it back, or in front of a mirror. Because saying the words to somebody are very, very different than understanding the thoughts that are written down in the bullet points on your page. Practice makes it easier and makes you stumble less. I can't tell you, again, not false modesty, truth. I can't tell you how many conversations early in our careers I bungled because I was so unsure of myself and didn't know what to do and was trying to be halfway kind to the person, and I probably went on and on and on. And I remember one person saying to me, "Well, what are you trying to tell me anyway?" Well, that's embarrassing, right? What are you trying to tell me? We've been sitting there for 5 minutes and I haven't conveyed anything to them. It's not easy.
Great. So next up is culture.
Yeah.
So what is it, and how can CEOs promulgate and nourish it?
So make no mistake, the culture starts and flows from you. And it's from how you act, not what you say. If what you say and how you act are different, the only thing people look at is how you act. So all the stuff up on the wall, if you don't embody it, it's useless. So I think of culture as, this is a simplistic way of thinking about it, but it's missing some elements, but it's not too bad. It's how people talk to each other and how people talk about each other. So how do we treat each other when we're face to face, and how do we talk about each other when the person is not present? So obviously respect is embedded in that statement, but we also have, we need to have a culture of productivity and collegiality and cooperation. We need to, one of my favorite phrases is, you shine by making others look good. So there are no sharp elbows here. There's no self-promotion. That's not working in our company. Also, may I just, as an aside, I want to say something. The stuff I'm saying now, I want to be sure that you don't think I feel this is necessary to have a successful company. The world is filled with sharp-edged, sharp elbows, tough companies that have been wildly successful. So this is not necessary. This is simply, this puts the wind at your back, in my opinion. It's more fun to run a company. It's easier to attract and keep good people. It's more self-rewarding at the end of the process because you've helped people develop their character. David Shaw, the football coach who spoke to us earlier, said one thing that I would add a slight modifier to. He said, the culture is set by the people you bring in. I think that's only true to a degree. I think people are not fully formed in culture always when they come to your company, and they're influenceable at the margin. So if they see other people being nice to them and helping them with their work and being solicitous and taking an interest in them and working really hard and those kinds of things, they can be influenced in that direction. And that's really your job as the CEO. And if you have that kind of culture, it's really hard for other companies to steal your good people away, the kind of people the best employees, the A players. Sure, you'll lose some. I mean, our company lost a bunch of them. A lot of them went on to head up their own companies. Other ones went on to do other things. But our turnover rate was pretty darn low by the time we got this figured out, which took a number of years. But this stuff really does work, and it makes it much more fun to go to work. I mean, can't we make it an enjoyable experience to go to work? It doesn't have to be drudgery. Can't it be fun? Can't we like the people? And can't we have a community of interest with them and work hard together and celebrate their victories? And really, it's not that hard to do. It just takes a little attention. It does take some reinforcement, and you can call it policing if you want, because when people drift, it's important to pick up on it and mention it to them nicely and be sure that they get straightened out. And if their apology is necessary, then suggest that they offer an apology. But it isn't impossible to do, and it's very rewarding.
Great. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip ahead and ask one more question that I know Irv has some specific thoughts on, then we'll open it up for a little bit of Q&A. And this question is really directed to, there are a lot of investors and board members in the audience here, search fund board members. And so the question is, what advice, Irv, do you have for search fund directors for how to best work with young CEOs?
So I'd like to tell you a story. For years, I've seen this term, Occams Razor. How many of you have ever seen that term, Occams Razor? I never knew what Occams Razor was until a few months ago, and I decided I'd look it up and figure it out. Well, Sir William of Occam, it's now spelled O-C-C-A-M, but it was O-C-K-H-A-M, Sir William of Occam, lived in the late 1200s and early 1300s in the town of Occam, county of Surrey, England. And he was what was then called a logician. A logician is a term we don't use anymore. It was a forerunner of the term philosopher. So he was a philosopher, and he and his philosopher friends used to argue about the principles of existence and the meaning of life and love and all this kind of stuff. And he developed Occam's Razor. And Occam's Razor, in essence, says when there's a complex problem, the simplest answer is usually the best one. And that's where the razor part came from, because he kept cutting away at assumptions that other people would make because those assumptions were shaky, and he would end up with the simplest answer. So Occam's Razor has come to apply to other areas of inquiry as well. So my point of view for your consideration is that Occam's Razor does not apply when we're talking about a director giving advice to a CEO. And here's why. Suppose a CEO comes to you as a director, and you're 20 years older, and you've got some years of experience, and the CEO is feeling confident enough to ask you, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think I should do? Well, what dynamic is set up with that question? The dynamic that's set up is a junior person, who's the CEO, is coming to a more senior person, the director, and saying, what do you think I should do? And that suggests, or that is likely to prompt an answer, whether the senior person really knows or has the direct experience or not. So the simplest thing would be an answer. The best answer in that context, in my opinion, is, I don't know. Let's figure it out. Same answer as you heard before. I'm not sure. I have some thoughts, maybe, or I've seen something like this before, but I'm not sure my context is exactly the same as yours. How long do you have to make this decision? Can that time be extended if necessary? What are the alternatives that you see? What are the alternative courses of action that you see here? What are they? And can we develop any other ones that are less obvious? Are there any experts we can turn to? There are often people who have seen this tens and tens of times. I was just in a board meeting yesterday where we were talking about a very specific intellectual property theft issue. And there are people all over this valley who know that stuff backwards and forwards. So let's find one of them. So the Socratic method of giving advice is one that I favor. It's a discovery process. It produces more alternatives. It produces more granular and careful thinking. I'm a believer that instinct or intuition is a wonderful sixth sense, but a very poor first sense. A very poor first sense. You know, we're all smart people. We've got the intellect to develop alternatives and to examine them and refine them and get some expert advice. Why don't we do that first and then maybe let our intuition work on the new body of data that we've assembled? So I think that's the way to give advice, unless you're absolutely dead sure that you know. Why forego the opportunity to go through a careful discovery process? Some of these critical decisions that you can help as a director, CEOs make, are inflection points in that company's history and can really turn the tide one way or the other in the success of that business.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.